Zul Part 1. Written by Peter Sarlo. Narrated by Steve Fortune. Copyright 2022. All rights reserved. The content contained within this book may not be reproduced, duplicated, or transmitted without direct written permission from the author or the publisher. Under no circumstances will any blame or legal responsibility be held against the publisher or author for any damages, reparation, or monetary loss due to the information contained within this book, either directly or indirectly. Chapter 2. The Hell Inn. Zul emerged first at the top of the stairs. Hidden in the shadows, nobody saw him. Glakas emerged next, then Narag. There were a good 2 meters between Zul and the other two. To Narag, they were the shortest 2 meters he had ever experienced. "That's the entrance," whispered Glakas. "It needs to be locked somehow. We don't want any leakage of your existence. Yet." "It is done," said Zul after a moment of concentration. Glakas looked at him in mild surprise, then accepted the fact as any person would an everyday event. The inn was as it had been, the only difference being the addition of 2 more men looking for something which they may not have been able to find anywhere else. Glakas looked over his shoulder at Narag. He was all tense, ready for the slightest whiff of trouble. This place is sometimes referred to as the Hell Inn, and now it was going to become one. Facing Zul, he said, "When I call you, come out and do what you do best." And with that he stepped out of the shadows and into the bright light as if he'd been part of the actual shadow itself, and had materialized into the form of a man, and emerged into the light for the first time, and stood behind the bar. The crowd did not know of him. The innkeeper, too, hadn't noticed him. He had his back turned. His daughter, however, had, and was communicating it to her father. Abruptly, Glakas clambered on to the bar, accidentally knocking some empty glasses onto the floor where they shattered. "What are you doing?" the innkeeper bellowed, standing next to the bar, studying Glakas with perplexity. His question was met with a well-aimed heel against the chest. "Get back, pig!" "Father!" his daughter cried in dismay and immediately stooped to help him up. "Stay down and you won't get hurt," ordered Glakas. A few people had noticed him now, but dismissed him from their minds as a drunkard. Glakas stood there, his feet finding wet holds amongst the disarray of glasses and bottles. He looked upon the crowd as would a judge a party of wicked people. "All of you, listen. Listen to me," he roared, his chest heaving. Small pockets of people stopped what they were doing and looked in his direction. It wasn't enough. He had to get the attention of the full crowd. Without a second thought, he bent, picked up a bottle of liquor, and hurled it amongst the more crowded part of the inn. It smashed into a tabletop. He had the attention of the full crowd now. He sucked in his breath. He said, venom dripping from his words, "All of you listen. Tonight you're going to get what you have deserved for a long time. All of you are scum. Degenerates." His pointed arm swept across the crowd in a fast progressive arc. "Living your filthy lives at the expense of others. Selling yourselves the way you do. You parasites don't deserve to—" "Hey, who the hell are you?" A rebellious youth with unkempt shaggy hair stood. "Yeah." Another man jumped to his feet, his clothes soaked with liquor. "What gives you the right to speak to us like that?" As if to back him, a chorus of yeahs filled the air. "This," shouted Glakas, and he called towards the shadow from which he himself had come. The crowd fell silent. A hulk of a man emerged from the shadows. The floorboards creaked as he walked towards the bar. Some men gasped. A few women gave vent to screams. To them he was a man, but the thing on his forehead was not natural. It was clear he couldn't be human. Terror gripped the room. Zul stopped behind the bar. Narag had appeared as well, his tentative eyes fixed on the former. Glakas eyed the crowd for a moment longer, then jumped down off the bar and tried to penetrate the black bottomless pools that were Zul's eyes. "They're all yours, Zul. But listen, if you try anything, you'll be history." His whisper was hard, meaningful as he backed away. Zul faced the crowd on his own. 1,000 years had elapsed, and these were the first people he saw. He could read the fear on their faces. One man, braver than the rest, stood. "Hey, mister, whoever, whatever you are and whatever you've got planned, leave me out of it, will you? I've done nothing to know." Before the man could conclude his speech, Zul quickly raised his own arm out in front of him, hand cupped but fingers parted stiffly. Energy of a mysterious kind surged through his pulsating veins. His arm tensed, the tenseness giving way to a trembling that sent vibrations through Zul's entire torso. And then the man's arms rose with a will of their own. The other's eyes darted in panic. "Hey! What? Hey, stop this! Help! Someone help me!" The ascent ceased when his arms were level with his trembling shoulders, his body rooted to the spot transfixed. Zul's breath was rasping through his open mouth and his eyes were hooded. As he mentally forced greater surges of energy through his ever more shaking arm, the crowd seemed to have a sudden insight into what was about to happen. Their horror-filled expressions, their erratic movements, the muffled cries of dire panic. Even Glakas, for the first time, felt a curl tightening in his stomach. The youth's body wavered, but his arms, stretched as they were, remained absolutely motionless, as if they weren't connected to him. He was struggling, throwing his head back and from side to side in a flurry of brown hair. His bared teeth gave him a clownish appearance. He stamped his feet. The contorted muscles on his face spelt agony. It was as if he just couldn't move from that spot. The tremendous shaking of Zul's outstretched arm was increasing still more. Suddenly, a fleshy, tearing sound ripped through the air, and the man's arms were pulled from their joints, along with each half of his chest, exposing the crab-like legs of his moist ribcage. They flew at swift speeds across the inn, where they slammed against opposite walls and fell to the floor with a sickening wet thud. For a second, a mockery of a man stood there, a man with a face frozen in an unnatural expression, like a robot with its maintenance plate removed, revealing its innards for repair. Then, predictably, he swayed, the exposed organs welling as he did. His mouth quavered, eyes flicked, head lolled, and he hit the floor. The body convulsed once, the exposed ribcage rasping on the wooden floor, overcharged nerves dissipating their charge. As the armless body lay in an expanding pool of blood, hot swirls of grey steam-like vapour rose from it. What followed reached a level beyond the capacity of human comprehension. But let it be said that, of all the people in the inn, not one met a painless death, a death in which pain wasn't the main purpose. May God have mercy on their souls. The door to the inn creaked open like a yawning mouth, and Zul, followed by Glakas and Narag, stepped out of the stale warmth of the inn into the fresh chill of the dawn air. The air was clear. The golden sun peered over the horizon as it rose. Dew covering the dry stone wall around the yard was rapidly disappearing. Birds were chirping in the trees. It was an uplifting contrast to the dark events that had just transpired. "What now?" asked Zul, rubbing his upper arms, his breath steam. Walking over to his horse tied to a sundial in the yard, Glakas said, with curtness he did not feel, "We face the king and report." "There are only 2 horses," observed Zul. "Here, put this on." Glakas threw him a rolled-up bundle which he had untied from the saddlebag. "There will be more horses in the stable round the back." Before he went, however, Glakas gave Narag a look which said everything, then disappeared around the back. When he returned with a horse, Zul was wearing a hooded black shawl. Its bagginess disguised any hint of his physical prowess, and his forehead was hidden from view. He led the horse to Zul. "This is yours. I'll have to tie your hands once you mount, though." He did, and after taking the precaution of making Zul ride up front, the 3 horsemen rode towards Solsh, the capital city of the northern kingdom. That was Zul, Part 1, by Peter Sarlo, narrated by Steve Fortune.